Lady Erilyn Moonshadow stood in the great hall of the Silverwood Council, and she knew what she was about to say would change everything. Elven lords sat in their ancient seats carved from living crystal, and their faces showed the weight of 300 years of war. Erilyn held her head high, even though her heart pounded like thunder. Behind her stood Nightwing. Dragon was massive, with scales black as the void between stars and eyes that glowed like purple flames. Nightwing was her bonded companion since childhood, and together they had fought in more battles than Erilyn cared to remember. The council elder named Sylvanus spoke first. He was old even by elven standards, with silver hair that fell past his waist, and robes that shimmered with protective magic. Child of Moonshadow, he said, and his voice echoed through the hall. You asked for this council, and we have granted it. Speak your mind, but know that we have little patience for desperate. Skamacelyn took a breath. Voidborn have broken through the last barrier, or worlds fall one by one. Now our magic, which sustained us for millennia, now feeds them. We are losing this war. The council members shifted uncomfortably. Everyone knew this truth, but no one wanted to hear it spoken aloud. And what solution do you propose? Another elder asked. Her name was Lirin, and she wore armor made of starlight. Aurelian met her Gazai. Propose an alliance with humanity. The hall erupted. Voices rose in anger and disbelief. Nightwing growled low, and the sound made the walls vibrate. Silence fell again. Humanity asked.
Oh.
Sylvanus, and his voice dripped with disdain. Those short-lived creatures who barely left their homeworld 2 centuries ago, what could they possibly offer us that our magic cannot achieve? They have something we lost, Erilyn said, firmly. The will to fight without honor, the will to win at any cost. Council stared at her in shock. Loran stood from her set. You speak of becoming savages, of abandoning everything that makes us elven. I speak of survival. Erilyn replied, I have studied the humans. They are new to the galaxy, yes, but they have already fought 3 wars against species that should have crushed them. They won every time, not because they had better weapons or stronger magic. They won because they refused to accept defeat. She paused and looked at each council member in turn. The Voidborn feed on our predictability. Every traditional formation, every ancient spell,
Always.
every honorable challenge. They have learned to counter all of it, but humans fight without tradition. They adapt and evolve, and they never stop. Sylvanus shook his head. If what you say is true, why would humanity help us? What do we offer them? Me, said Erlinthe. Council fell silent again. I offer myself in political marriage to one of their leaders, my magic and Nightwing in exchange for their military support. Would bind yourself to a human? Lyra asked, and her voice was barely a whisper. For how long? Until they die, which for them means perhaps 60 or 70 years, a blink of an eye for our Pioplirlin, not a decent. In that short time, either we win this war or we lose everything. Council debated for hours, but in the end they had no choice. The Voidborn ships appeared in orbit around the Silverwood homeworld. The very next day, Erilyn took Nightwing and fled through a portal to human space before the council could change their mind. She arrived at the human military station called Outpost Meridian. The humans there were surprised to see an elf and a dragon appear on their doorstep. They called for their commander. Captain Jake Morrison came to meet her within the Erilyn studied him carefully. He was tall for a human, with short brown hair and gray eyes that seemed to see right through her. He wore a simple uniform with medals she did not recognize. His movements were controlled and precise like a predator. Conserving energy, Nightwing sent her a message through their mental bond. This one smells of old wars and older rage. Be careful. Bonded on Erilyn ignored the warning. Captain Morrison, she said, and bowed slightly. Am Lady Erilyn Moonshadow of the Silverwood realm. Come with a proposal. Jake looked at her and then at Nightwing. Dragon was too large for the station corridor and had to crouch. A proposal, he said. His voice was calm and measured. My people are at war with an enemy called the Voidborn, or lose an eye. Offer myself in marriage to you in exchange for human military intervention. We bring magic, ancient knowledge, and a dragon. You bring your fleet and your way of war. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. It was not a kind smile. You want us to save you, he said. Yes, Erilyn admitted, but also to save yourselves. The Voidborn will not stop. With elven worlds, once they consume all magic in our realm, they will turn to yours. Better to fight them now with allies than later. Alonjik nodded slowly. "All right," he said. Except, just like that, Erlen asked. She had expected negotiation, or at least questions. Jake looked at Nightwing again, and then back at Harry. "Have read reports about the Voidborn," he said. "I know what they are and what they don't. I know my people. We are very good at one thing, Lady Moonshadowar. If you want to marry a monster, to fight your monsters, then I am your monster." The wedding was arranged within 3 days. It took place aboard the human flagship called the Terran Dawn. The ship was massive, but it had none of the elegance of elven vessels. Everything was metal and sharp angles and practical. Erlen wore her traditional elven wedding gown made of moonlight and silver thread. Jake wore his dress uniform. A human priest performed their ceremony first, using words Erlen barely understood. Then an elven priestess, who had come with Erlen, spoke the ancient binding vows. Erlen repeated the words that would tie her fate to this human. She watched his face. Jake showed no emotion. His eyes were distant, as if he was already thinking about the war to come. When the ceremony ended and they were declared married, Jake leaned close to her. "One thing you should know," he said quietly. "I am going to win this war for you, bet. You might not like how I do." Erlen felt a chill run down her spine. Nightwing sent her another warning to late bonded one. "We are bound to him now for better or worse." That night, Erlen stood on the observation deck of the Terran Dawn and watched the stars. Jake found her there. "Tomorrow we begin," he said. "I already sent orders to the fleet. We move against the Voidborn at dawn." Erlen turned to face her new husband. "What will you do?" Jake smiled, that cold smile against something. "Your people would never do something. The Voidborn will never expect I am going to cheat." And as Erlen looked into those gray eyes, she realized with growing horror that she had not married a human to end the war. She married a weapon, and weapons only know how to destroy. Erlen expected fleets and weapons and grand battles like the ones in elven history. What she saw instead made her question everything she knew about war. Jake did not send his ships to defend elven worlds immediately. Instead, he spent 5 days studying. He watched every battle recording the elves had from 300 years of fighting. He sat in his command center with dozens of screens showing Voidborn attacks from every angle. Rodlin watched him work. He barely slept. He barely ate. His officers brought him reports, and he absorbed them all with frightening focus. Nightwing observed from the corner of the command center. The dragon could not fit inside completely, so his massive head rested near the doorway. "He watches like a hunter studying prey," Nightwing told Erlen through their bond knot, "like a soldier preparing for battle." On the 5th day, Jake called Erlen to his office. She entered to find him standing before a massive holographic display. It showed the movements of Voidborn forces across a dozen systems. "Your people fight beautifully," he said, without turning around. "Every formation is perfect. Every spell precisely cast, every challenge issued with proper honor." He finally looked at her. "That is why you are losing." Erlen felt anger rise in her chest. "Our tactics have served us for thousands of years against other honorable opponents." "Yes," Jake said. "The Voidborn are not honorable. They are predators. And predators do not care about beauty or tradition. They care about feeding." He touched the holographic display and it changed now. It showed patterns and predictions. "The Voidborn have learned your patterns," he said. "Every time you form a defensive sphere, they counter with tactic alpha. Every time you cast a barrier spell, they use absorption technique. Bitu have become predictable and predictable prey dies." "So what do you suggest?" Erlen asked. Jake smiled. "We stop being predictable." The first engagement came 2 days later. Voidborn high fleet surrounded the elven colony world called Starfall. Colony sent desperate calls for help. Jake ordered his fleet to move Erlen, and Nightwing joined the battle as Jake had requested. Expected to see human ships form traditional battle lines. Instead, the human fleet scattered ships flew in chaotic patterns that made no tactical sense. The Voidborn moved to surround them as they always did. Then Jake gave the order. Erlen watched in shock as human ships began using destroyed Voidborn vessels as weapons. They grabbed the wreckage with tractor beams and hurled it at other Voidborn ships. They rigged asteroids with massive bombs and disguised them as debris. When Voidborn ships came close to feed on the energy signatures, the asteroids exploded. One human destroyer broadcast a surrender signal. Voidborn moved in to capture it and drain its power. The destroyer opened all its hatches inside. Were not crew, but antimatter charges. Explosion vaporized 6 Voidborn cruiser. Saralin felt sick. These tactics were dishonorable. They were cruel. They were also devastatingly effective, but the worst was yet to come. A massive Voidborn carrier appeared at the edge of the system. It began launching fighter craft by the thousands. Jake ordered a boarding party. He would lead it himself. Farallon objected. You are the fleet commander, she said. You cannot risk yourself in close combat. Jake looked at her with those cold gray eyes. I am not just a commander, he said. I am a weapon, and sometimes you need to use your sharpest blade. He took a team of 20 soldiers. They flew a small ship directly at the Voidborn carrier. Point defense weapons should have destroyed them instead. Jake flew through the debris field from the earlier explosions. The Voidborn sensors could not track them through all the wreckage. They latched onto the carrier hull and cut their way in. Sadirlin had a magical connection to the battle through her bond with Nightwing. She could sense the ebb and flow of combat. She felt Jake enter the Voidborn ship. What she sensed next horrified her. The Voidborn were nightmares. They had no true form. They were living darkness that consumed light and magic and life itself inside their ships. The environment was toxic to most species, but Jake and his team moved through it like they belonged. There they wore sealed suits, but that was not what disturbed Erolin. It was how they fought. Telvin warriors fought with grace and skill. They used magic and swordplay in an ancient dance of Kambachic. Fought like a machine built only to kill. He used grenades to flush Voidborn from cover. He used their own acidic blood as a weapon by rupturing their bodies near other enemies. He set traps, using his own wounded soldiers as bait when a Voidborn grabbed one of his men. Soldiers survived because Jake had calculated the exact angle, but Erlen saw the coldness in that decision. No hesitation, no emotion, just pure efficiency. The boarding team reached the carrier core. It was a pulsing mass of dark energy that powered the entire ship. Jake planted charges around it, but before he could detonate them, a Voidborn Queen appeared. She was massive, easily 3 times the size of a normal Voidborn. She radiated power that made Erlen shiver even from light years away. The Queen spoke. Her voice was like nails on ice. Human, she said, you fight without honor. You use tricks and deception. You are weak. Jake laughed. It was a terrible sound. Honor, he said. These for species that can afford it. We cannot, so we cheat. He triggered the charges. Explosion ripped through the carrier core. The Queen screamed, but Jake was already running. His team sprinted back to their ship through collapsing corridors. 2 soldiers did not make it. Jake sealed the hatches and left them behind. The carrier exploded as they escaped, but Darylin watched it die and felt both relief and horror. When Jake returned to the flagship, he was covered in dark ichor. His suit was melted in places. His face was Cal. Marilyn confronted him in the landing bayou. Left 2 of your people behind, she said. Jake removed his helmet. Yes, he said, if I waited for them, the Voidborn would have sealed the breach. All of us would have died this way. 18 survived, and we destroyed their carrier. Marilyn stared at him. How can you be so cold? They were your soldiers or people. Jake met her gaze, and for the first time, she saw something other than ice in his eyes. She saw Paneva. Every single one of them volunteered. He said quietly, they knew the risks. They knew I would not wait in. They came anyway because they trust me to win. That is what command means, Lady Moonshadow. Making choices that let you sleep at night is a luxury. I make choices that let my species survive. He walked past her. Nightwing rumbled deep in his chest. Now, you understand, Bonded One? The dragon said, humans do not fight wars, they fight extinction, and they will do anything to avoid a. Terralin watched Jake disappeared down the corridor. She thought about elven honor, about 300 years of losing battles fought the right way, about the carrier Jake just destroyed using the wrong way, and she realized something terrifying. She was starting to think he was right. That night she stood in her quarters aboard the Terran. Dawn through the window, she could see the debris field where the Voidborn carrier had died. Jake entered without knocking. They had not spoken since the battle. Your people won today, she said. You saved Starfall. Yusu did it by abandoning every principle of honorable warfare. Jake stood beside her at the window. Your people are dying, he said. My people are winning. You married me to change that balance. Did you think that would come without Kosteralin? Turned to face him. I thought humans would be allies, she said. Not monsters, Jake smiled. Sadly, we are both, he said. That is what makes us dangerous. And as Erilyn looked at her husband, she finally understood what Nightwing had tried to warn her about. Jake Morrison was not a man playing at war. He was war itself, and she had bound herself to him. The victories continued. World after world was liberated from Voidborn controls. The elven people began to hope again. Erilyn saw the price they paid for each victory, and she learned secrets about Jake that made her question everything. 3 months after the battle at Starfall, a Voidborn queen took hostages. She captured an elven research station called Haven Point 5. 1,000 elves lived there, including children. The queen sent a message. She would kill 1 hostage every hour until the human fleet withdrew from elven space. The Elven Council begged Jake to negotiate. Jake spent exactly 12 minutes analyzing the situation, then he ordered the station destroyed. Erilyn was in the command center when he gave the order. She could not believe what she heard. Those are our people, she said. Her voice was shaking with rage. They are already dead, Jake replied. His voice was flat, empty. Queen is using them as bait. She wants us to send rescue ships. She has 3 more hive fleets waiting in hyperspace. We go for the hostages. She springs the trap. We lose the fleet, and the hostages die anyway. There must be another way, Erilyn insisted. Jake turned to face her. His gray eyes were hard as stone. Show me, he said. Show me the other way. You have the same tactical data. Idosh, show me how to save them. Erilyn pulled up the holographic display. She studied the station location, the Voidborn fleet positions, the hyperspace signature. She ran simulation after simulation. Every scenario ended the same way. The hostages died. Sometimes the fleet died with them. Jake watched her work. He did not interrupt. After an hour, Erilyn stopped. Her hands were shaking. I cannot, she whispered. Jake nodded. Neither can I, he said, but I can save 3 colony worlds by destroying this station now. Before the Queen uses it to lure us into her trap. Those 3 worlds have a combined population of 8 million. The math. He gave the order again. The human destroyers fired. Haven Point vanished in a ball of fusion fire. 5,000 elves died instantly. Jake was right. The Voidborn trap failed. 3 hive fleets emerged from hyperspace to find nothing but debris. The human fleet ambushed them. Instead, 1 million lives saved. 5,000 lost. Erilyn hated that the mathematics made sense. She hated more that she had checked those same calculations. Agreed. That night, she could not sleep. Nightwing lay beside her in the Dragon quarters. The ship had been modified to accommodate him. He was too large to fit comfortably, but he managed to. Her changing bonded one. Nightwing said. His voice in her mind was gentle. I can feel it. To think like the human now. Is that wrong? Erilyn asked. The dragon was quiet for a long time. I do not know, he finally said, but I feel it too. The cold logic, the brutal efficiency. It seeps into us like poison or like medicine. Erilyn could not answer that. She began researching humanity. The elves had files on every spacefaring species, but they had mostly ignored humans. Too young, too primitive, too short-lived to matter now. Erilyn read everything. What she found terrified her. Humans were the only species in galactic history to evolve through constant warfare against their own kind. For thousands of years they killed each other over land, over resources, over ideas other species had. Wars, but usually against external threats. Humans perfected the art of killing themselves. They built weapons designed specifically to murder other humans. They developed tactics to exploit human psychology. They studied human weakness and learned to weaponize it. By the time they reached the stars, they carried genetic memory of 10,000 years of warfare. Human was descended from ancestors who survived because they were better killers than their neighbors. No wonder they fought without honor. They had learned long ago that honor got you killed. Erilyn dug deeper. She found files on Jake Morrison. Specifically, what she discovered made her sick. Jake was a survivor of the Proxima Massacre. Erilyn had never heard of it. She read the reports. With growing horror, 20 years ago, a hostile alien species attacked the human colony on Proxima Centauri. The aliens wanted the planet for themselves. They thought it would be easy. Humans were new to space, the colony was lightly defended the aliens, landed ground forces, and began systematically killing colonists. But the colonists did not surrender. They fought back with improvised weapons, with traps, with ambushes. With a desperate fury that shocked their attackers, the siege lasted 2 years. By the time human reinforcements arrived, most of the colonists were dead, but so were most of the alien invaders. Surviving humans had killed over 50,000 enemy soldiers using nothing but determination and creativity. Morrison was 12 years old when the siege began. His parents died in the first week. He survived by hiding, then by scavenging, then by killing. By the time rescue came, Jake had personally killed over 200 enemy soldiers. He used traps made from farming equipment, ambushes. In the ruins of his home, tactics that made hardened soldiers vomit when they saw the results. The military took him in after trained him, turned his survival instincts into something even deadlier. It rose through the ranks not because of politics, but because he won every time, no matter the cost. Aralen understood Najek had not married her for alliancy. Married her because he recognized the Voidborn as the same kind of enemy humanity always faced: existential, merciless, total. And he knew his people would excel at this kind of war. She confronted him that night in his quarters. "I know about Proxima," she said. Jake was cleaning his sidearm. He did not look up. "Do you now? You were a child." Aralen said, "What they did to you, what you had to. Doi, I'm sorry." Jake finished cleaning the weapon and set it down. "Sorry." He repeated the words, seemed to amuse him. "You were sorry that I learned how to survive that. I became good at killing things that want to kill me. Would you prefer I died at Proxima, left my bones in the ruins with my parents? Then you would have no husband, no alliance, no hope." "That is not what I meant," Aralen said. Jake stood and faced Hearth. "Then what did you mean? That I am broken, that I am a monster? I know what I am, Lady Moonshadowy. Have known since I was 12 years old. I am a weapon. You've married a weapon. Do not act surprised when I do what weapons." Doralyn felt tears in her eyes. Did not know when she started crying. "I just wanted to understand," she said. "Why you are so cold, why nothing seems to touch you." Jake stepped closer. His voice became softer. "Something does touch me," he said. "Every single death touches my every soldier I leave behind. Every station I destroy, every hostage. I cannot feel all of it, but I cannot let it stop me. Because if I stop, if I hesitate, if I choose my feelings over logic, then everyone dies, not just some. Everyone." He reached out and wiped a tear from her cheek. The gesture was surprisingly gentle. "I think I do not care," he said. "I care too much. That is why I have to be cold. Someone has to make the terrible choices. Someone has to bear the weight. Better me than someone who might break under." A Terralyn looked into his eyes for the first time. She saw past the ISI. She saw the pain he carried, the guilt, the exhaustion, the absolute determination to save as many lives as possible, even if it destroyed him. Man, she realized something. She was falling in love with him, not despite his ruthlessness, because of it, because she understood now that his cruelty was the deepest form of compassion, doing what must be done so others did not have. To Nightwing spoke in her mind. "We are lost, bonded one. We have become like him." Aralen did not answer. She kissed Jake instead, and in that moment she accepted the truth. She was no longer fully elven. She was becoming something else, something darker, something necessary. The war continued, and Aralen fought beside her husband with growing understandings. She stopped questioning his decisions. She started making the same calculations. 5,000 versus 8,000,000. 1 ship versus 1 fleet. Nar versus survival. Mathematics of war, cold, brutal, necessary. The Elven Council noticed the change in her. They sent messages asking if she was well. If the human had corrupted her, Aralen deleted the messages without responding. Had learned from Jake words did not matter, only results, and they were winning. The war reached its critical moment. Intelligence reported that the Voidborn had a home dimension, a place beyond normal space where their true power resided. Jake proposed a direct assault. The Elven Council called it suicide. They were probably right, but Jake had a plan. It required combining elven magic with human technology in ways that violated natural law here. It needed Aralen to bond Nightwing with a human warship, to merge dragon and machine into one entity. The council forbade it. Such magic was heretical, went against everything the elves believed about the natural order. Aralen agreed to do it anyway. She had stopped listening to the council months ago. Ship chosen for the bonding was the human dreadnought. Valkyriot was the most powerful vessel. In the fleet, Jake had it modified according to airline specifications. Ancient. Elven runes were carved into its hull, magical conduits were woven through its systems. Reactor core was replaced with a hybrid design that could channel both energy and magic. The bonding ritual took 3 to Sarlin stood in the center of the Valkyrie bridge. Nightwing curled around the ship exterior. His massive form dwarfed the vessel. Jake watched from a safe distance. Even he could not help with this. It was beyond human understanding. Ernie began the incantation, words older than starlight magic that had not been used in millenniating. Roared not in pain, but in transformation. His consciousness began to expand, to merge with the ship's system. Sarlin felt it. Through their bond, her dragon was becoming something new, machine and beast metal and scale technology and magic. The pain was unbearable. Literally screamed as the feedback tore through her mind. Nightwing was dying and being reborn simultaneously. She felt every moment of it. Jake tried to stop the ritual. He ran forward to pull her away from the magical field. Energy blast through him across the bridge. He hit a wall hard enough to crack ribs, but he got back up. Perlin saw him through the magical fire. He was shouting something she could not hear over the roar of transformation, but she read his lips. Stop, you are killing yourself. She shook her head. This was necessary. This was the only way to win the ritual. Completed. The magical fire died. Darylyn collapsed. Jake caught her before she hit the deck. She was barely conscious. He carried her to the medical bay. When she woke 3 days later, everything had changed. Nightwing was gone, not dead, but transformed. The dragon consciousness now lived in the Valkyrie systems. Ship had scales instead of armor plating, wings instead of standard engines, weapons that breathed fire and launched spell. Sarlin could still feel Nightwing through their bond, but he was different now. We are one, bonded one, the dragon voice said in her mind. Ship and beast magic and metal. We are weapon now, true weapon. Erlin went to the bridge. Jake was waiting. He looked exhausted. Broken ribs were healing slowly. You did it, he said. His voice held something she rarely heard. Respect, maybe even awe. The Valkyrie is operational, more than operational. Shays incredibly early sat in the command chair. It had been modified for her. Neural links connected her directly to the ship's systems. Through them, she felt Nightwing presence everywhere. In the engines, in the weapons, in the sensor. She was the interface between dragon and machine. Show me, she said. Jake gave the order. The Valkyrie launched. Darylyn felt the ship respond to her thoughts. It moved like Nightwing used to fly, graceful, deadly alive. They tested the weapon systems. The main cannon breathed antimatter fire wrapped in magical energy. The missiles sought targets with draconic intelligence. The shields were living force fields that adapted and learned. Point defense systems fired with supernatural accuracy. We can win. With this, Erlin said. Yes, Jake replied, but the transformation changed you. You sat beside her. You feel it too, don't you? Darkness. Erlin knew what he meant. The bonding had altered her fundamentally. She saw battle the way Jake did, now not as honor duels, but as problems requiring efficient solutions. When Voidborn forces attacked a refugee convoy 2 days later, Erlin did not hesitate. She could save half the refugees if she acted immediately, or she could try to save them all and probably lose. Everyone, she chose to save half, then use the dying half as bait for a counter-ambush. Voidborn fell into the trapperel and destroyed them with brutal efficiency. Surviving refugees called her a hero. The dying one screamed her name in betrayal. Shay felt nothing that night. Jake found her in her quarters. She was staring at her hands. These hands used to create beauty, she said. Music, heart healing. Magic now, they only destroyed. Jake sat beside her. Welcome to humanity, he said. Quietly, this is what it costs to. When we become the monsters we fight. Erlin looked at him. Do you regret it, what you became at Proxima? Jake was quiet for a long time. Every single day, he finally said, but I would do it again because the alternative is worse. Erlin understood. She leaned against him. He put an arm around her. They sat in silence. 2 weapons, pretending to be people, 2 killers, trying to remember what it felt like to be something else. Next week, brought more battles, more victories, more compromises with Darkness Saralyn. Stopped counting the lives she sacrificed for the greater good. Numbers became meaningless only. The objective mattered: destroy the Voidborn save. The galaxy win at any cost. Jake noticed the change in her. You were ready, he said. Ready for what? The final assault. We attacked the Voidborn home dimension in 3 days. Saralyn felt a chill that Sunjake nodded. I found their weakness, a way to collapse their entire dimension. But requires getting to the core and staying alive long enough to plant the charges. Valkyrie can get us there, Saralyn said. I. No, Jake replied. That is why I waited until now, until you were ready, till you could do what needs to be done, without hesitation. Airily met his gaze. What needs to be done? Jake pulled up a holographic display. It showed the Voidborn dimension structure. To collapse it, we need to overload the dimensional core. That requires someone to stay behind too. Hold the collapse stable while everyone else escapes. Understanding hit Saralyn like a physical blow. You are planning to Jake's smile. It was a sad smile. I have been planning to die since Proxima Death has been chasing me for 20 years' time to stop running. Saralyn said. Her voice was fierce. We find another way. We always find another way. Jake touched her face gently. There is no other way. Checked hundreds of simulations. This is the only scenario where we win. The Voidborn are destroyed permanently. Where the galaxy is safe. One life for trillions. The math is clear. Saralyn felt tears streaming down her face. So I will not let you. He kissed her. Hit was tender. Finelli will let me, he said, because you've learned to make the hard choices, because you understand now what command means, because you are strong enough to do what I cannot live with. The Victoria. Saralyn wanted to argue, wanted to rage, wanted to find the flaw in his logic, but she had become too much like him. She saw the truth. Terrible mathematical truth. Jake was right. He was always right, and she hated it. In Nightwing spoke in her mind. I am sorry, bonded one. Sorry. We could not save him. Sorry. We became this sorry for everything, but he is right. We must let him go. Saralyn held Jake. She memorized the feel of him, the warmth, the heartbeat, the life that would soon be gone tomorrow. We plan the assault, she said. Her voice was steady despite the tears. Tonight we pretend we are not weapons. Jake nodded. Tonight, he agreed, we remember what it was like to be human, to be alive, to be alive. They spent the night together, talking, holding each other, pretending tomorrow would never come. But it did. Tomorrow always came, and with it came war. The combined human and elven fleet gathered at the dimensional breach. 50 capital ships, 300 support vessels, thousands of fighters. Of them preparing for a battle that most would not serve. Saralyn stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie. Through her neural connection, she felt Nightwing presence in every system. The dragon had grown comfortable in his new form. Perhaps too comfortable. We are ready, bonded one. Nightwing said, ready to fly one last time, ready to burn the darkness away. Jake was on the bridge with her. He wore combat armor modified with elven runes. His weapons were a mix of human technology and magical enhancements. He looked calm too, calm like a man who had already accepted his death. The fleet commanders reported in one by one. Was ready. Jake gave the order, commence assault. The Valkyrie led the charge. Saralyn felt the ship respond to her wilt. They plunged through the dimensional barrier. Reality twisted. The laws of physics screamed in protest. The other side was nightmare. Voidborn home dimension was a place where light died, where matter decayed, where the very concept of existence was optional. Voidborn entities swarmed to meet them, creatures the size of moons, beings made of living darkness, horrors that had no name in any language. The battle began. Saralyn flew the Valkyrie like Nightwing used to, sword twisting between attacks, breathing antimatter, fire-launching magical missiles that burned with the fury of dying stars around her. The fleet fought with desperate courage. Human ships used every trick Jake had taught them. Melvin vessels wielded magic with newfound ruthlessness. Together they carved a path through the Voidborn forces, but the enemy was endless. For every Voidborn destroyed, 10 more appeared. The fleet was taking heavy casualties. Ships exploded, crews died, but they kept pushing forward. Award. The dimensional core. Jake coordinated the ground assault from the Valkyrie bridge. It assembled strike teams of the best human and elven soldiers. Their mission was to reach the core and plant the collapse charge. It was a suicide mission. Everyone knew it. Everyone volunteered anyway. The Valkyrie reached the core for Sterlin, brought the ship in close-used. Nightwing enhanced sensors to map the structure. It was massive. A pulsing sphere of dark energy the size of a small planet. This was the heart of the Voidborn, source of their power destroy. This and their entire species would collapse. Jake prepared to launch with his strike team. Saralyn grabbed his arm one last time. She said, "Tell me there was another way." Jake looked at her with those gray eyes, and for the first time since she met him, she saw not fear of death, fear of leaving her behind. "There is no other way," he said softly. "You know that?" "Ty, no." "Then why do I keep hoping?" "Because hope is what separates us from them," Jake said. He gestured at the Voidborn swarm outside. "They gave up hope eons ago, became pure hunger, pure consumption. We still hope, still dream, still love. That is why we will win." He kissed her one final time. "Keep them off me, as long as you can hold the line, until the charges are set, then run. Do not look back, do not wait for Majest." Runarlin nodded. She could not speak. She spoke, she would beg him to stay in. They both knew that was not an option. Jake took his teams and launched 20 small assault craft, 400 soldiers, all of them heading towards certain Detheralent. Watch them go. Then she turned the Valkyrie to face the Voidborn. "Come on," she whispered. "Come and die." The Voidborn obliged. They threw everything at her massive dreadnoughts. Swarms of fighters, living weapons that defied description. Arany fought like she had never fought before. She channeled Nightwing full power through the Valkyrie systems. The ship became a dragon of metal and fire-breathing, death-raining destruction, moving with impossible grace. The rest of the fleet rallied around her, formed a defensive sphere, holding the line, buying time for Jake through the tactical feed. Erlen watched his progress. The strike teams fought their way into the dimensional core. They moved through corridors that should not exist, fighting enemies that violated reality. Soldiers died, but they kept pushing forward. Jake led from the front. Erlen saw him through drone cameras. He fought with the efficiency she had come to expect. No wasted movement, no hesitation. Pure lethal precision. Then the Voidborn Queen appeared. She materialized in front of Jake. Team massive, beyond comprehension, radiating power that made the dimensional core tremble. Queen spoke. Her voice was the sound of universes dying. "Human, you have come far, but this ends now. You cannot win." Jake laughed, that terrible cold laugh Erlen had learned to recognize. "Cannot," he said. "Watch me." He charged. The Queen moved to crush him. Jake dodged, rolled, came up, firing his weapons. Did nothing against Hersha. Was too powerful, too vast. But Jake was not trying to kill her. He was distracting her while his teams planted the collapse charges around the core. The Queen realized too late. She screamed in rage, tried to stop them, but Jake was in her way. He fought with everything he had, using tactics that made no sense, exploiting weaknesses that should not exist, buying seconds, then minutes, then the charges were set. Teams tried to retreat. The Queen killed most of them with a sweep of her massive form. Only Jake remained. He stood alone before the Queen, covered in wounds, barely standing, but still. Erlen felt him through the magical connection she shared with the Valkyrie systems. He was dying. The Voidborn had infected him during the earlier boarding action. She had not known. He had hidden it from her. The infection had been killing him slowly for months. Every battle had been fought on borrowed time now. That time was up. The infection surged through him, but instead of killing him, it gave him power. Voidborn power. Jake began to change. His form shifted, became something between human and Voidborn could exist in both dimensions, now moved between reality. Strike from impossible angles. He became a living weapon. The thing Erlen had always feared. He would become. The Queen attacked. Jake met Hertha. Battle that followed was beyond description. To beings of immense power fighting in a place where reality was optional. The Valkyrie sensors could barely track Iterline. Watched through tears. Her husband was dying, becoming a monster, sacrificing everything for victory. The Queen faltered. Jake pressed the advantage. He channeled the Voidborn infection, used their own power against them, wrapped himself around the dimensional core and triggered the collapse. The core began to implode. Reality screamed. The dimensional fabric started tearing apart. The Queen tried to stop it, but Jake held the collapse. Stable gave the fleet time to escape. Erlen received his final transmission. He said, His voice was distorted and human, but still recognizably. "Jake, get everyone out, tell them. I was not a war god, just a human doing what humans do, best refusing to die quietly." The transmission cut off. Fairlyn wanted to stay, wanted to dive back, try to save him, but she had learned from Jake. She knew what he would want, what he would demand. She gave the order, all ships retreat. The fleet turned and fled through the dimensional breach. The Valkyrie was the last to live. Fairlyn looked back one final time. She saw Jake standing at the center of the collapsing dimension, holding the queen, holding reality itself, keeping it stable long enough for everyone to escape. Their eyes met across the distance. He smiled that sad, cold smile. Then the dimension collapsed, and the queen and all the Voidborn erased from existence. The breach sealed behind them. The fleet emerged into normal space, battered, broken, but alive. The Voidborn were destroyed. The war was over. Humanity and the elves had won. Fairlyn sat in the command. Chernum Bemtinti spoke softly in her mind. "He is gone. Bonded one. War god has fallen, but we remain, we survive, we remember." Arelon did not crew. She had no tears left. She become too much like Jake, too efficient, too cold, too focused on survival. To waste time on grief, there would be time for mourning later. For now there were wounded to 10 families. To notify a victory, to secure, she gave the orders, coordinated the retreat, organized the fleet, did what needed to be done, just like Jake taught her. 50 years passed. The galaxy remembered. The war statues of Jake Morrison stood on 100 world songs were sung of his impossible victories. He became legend. Human war god who married an elf and saved the universe. Cyriline stood before a new generation of warriors, both human and elventing them. What Jake taught Hera? Young cadet asked a question. Is it true he never lost a battle? Lyn thought about Proxima, about the 5,000 at Haven Point, about all the soldiers Jake left behind, all the choices that haunted him. "No," she said quietly. "He lost constantly. He just refused to let any loss be final." The cadets did not understand. They saw the legend. Not the Costaralan did not explain further. Some truths were too heavy for the young Nightwing. Rested beside her, restored to dragon form after the Valkyrie was decommissioned. But forever changed by the bonding, he still remembered being a ship, being a weapon. "You still search for him," the dragon said. "After all these years you believe he served Raylan?" Smiled. It was a sad smile, very much like Jake used to give sometimes. In dreams she felt him through the old magical connection, fragments of consciousness scattered across space and time, still fighting, still refusing to die. The dimensional collapse had not killed him. It had scattered him, torn him across reality, but humans did not give up. They did not accept the impossible. They just kept fighting until reality bent to their will, and she had been married to a human long enough to learn that lesson. "I will find him," she said, "however long it takes. Whatever it costs, I will bring him home." Nightwing rumbled agreement. "Then we search Bonded One for as long as needed. The war may be over, but our mission continues." Arelene looked at the stars somewhere out there. Jake was still fighting, still surviving.